Throughout Athel Loren, one can observe two distinct relationships between wood elves and forest spirits. The first, and decidedly most common relationship, is cooperation. In these cases, elf and dryad are unified in purpose, working together to overcome challenges that would otherwise overwhelm each individually. This was Durthu's vision for the forest, though his rage and grief have long blinded him to the fruition of his dream. The second relationship, foretold and exacerbated by the Elder Coeddil, is conflict. Forest spirits steal elven children and murder the unsuspecting, deeds which the Azrai punish with ingenious acts of cruelty in turn. Malevolent spirits that aren't slain are inevitably banished for their misdeeds, confined to a single corner of the forest they once called home. There they wander, lost to a madness that blooded life finds itself ill-equipped to understand. Warded by a fence of enchanted waystones and guarded by cold-eyed wood elves, this realm is Cythral, the Wildwoods. Cythral's foundation dates back to the earliest days of Athel Loren. The first wood elves, aware that some forest spirits would never accept their presence and lash out accordingly, knew they would need to find a way to quarantine these hostile entities. They were in luck, for the natural geography of Athel Loren presented an obvious location for a spirit prison. The southeastern corner of the forest is almost completely surrounded by mountains, with the vaults rising in the south, and the Grey Mountains covering the northern and eastern flanks. Several small mountains reach out from the main body of the ranges, and into the forest. These minor arms, known as the Collodinian Edge, cut off a small portion of the woodland from Athel Loren at large. Only a small gap between the peaks connects the region to neighboring Adelwith and Talsin. With such robust geographic constraints already in place, this was deemed the perfect place to banish unruly spirits who would not accept the elves into the forest. While the mountains act as serviceable physical barriers to escape, the forest spirits of Athel Loren can't be contained by inconvenient geography alone. Mystical measures would need to be undertaken. Fortunately, the wood elves were up to the task. It was a simple matter for the early elves to place offensive waystones around what would become Cythral. These enchanted stones power the ritual around the forest, acting as a spiritual prison for the corrupted spirits. No fey creature can pass through this warding without great effort or cunning so long as the stones still stand. Of course, some of the treemen confined within are strong enough to topple these monuments, so the Elves of Sithral are constantly on the lookout for fallen waystones. While one fallen stone is little threat, several adjacent stones collapsing at once presents the very real possibility of a mass escape. In such instances, the Wildwood Rangers and Eternal Guard of Cythral rush to defend the breach, willing to sell their lives dearly so the Spellweavers can mend the damage. One can find all kinds of evil forest spirits within the Wildwoods. Crazed dryads, insane treemen, shadow naiads, and deepwood fetchlings are just a few of the potential threats lurking within its thorny depths. The dangers these spirits present varies widely, from simple physical harm to much, much worse. Many of the land's prisoners are shapeshifters and use their talents for nefarious purposes. Some of Cythral's inhabitants are capable of assuming forms too terrible for the mortal mind to comprehend, leaving those who gaze upon them catatonic or dead from fright. Others can take alluring forms, drawing in the foolish or unwary. These unfortunate victims are seldom heard from again, and those that are come back wrong. Their souls have been eaten by the forest spirits, their hollowed-out form turned into a shell for changelings. The protective sheath of mortal flesh lets the shapeshifters escape from the Wildwoods, free to run amok among the mortal races. Of course, all these threats pale before Cythral's greatest prisoner. Coeddil, one of only 2 elder treemen left in the entire world, is imprisoned within for his attempted coup against the Wood Elves long ago. There is no more dangerous inhabitant within the Wildwoods, and no elf has ever dared step foot within his domain. The Elves of Sithral don't actually live within the Wildwoods, as to do so would invite a slow and horrible death. Instead, they dwell in halls outside of the Waystone fence, and only enter when absolutely necessary. Led by Lady Drea, the Nighthawk, it is the Sithrali's solemn duty to defend the rest of Athel Loren from the imprisoned forest spirits, and they take this responsibility very seriously. The abundance of shapeshifters among their prisoners has made Cythral's elves incredibly distrustful of outsiders, as any unknown individual could be an escaped changeling. Even among the notoriously insular denizens of Athel Loren, the Cythrali are incredibly xenophobic. They have adopted a kill first, ask questions later mentality, and trespassers are beheaded and incinerated with alarming regularity to prevent possible escapes. Better an innocent die than even one of the Wildwoods' foul inhabitants escape to trouble the elves once more. Despite the harm the forest spirits of the Wildwoods have unleashed upon the world, the Wood Elves have found some use for them. For one, any invaders attacking from the southeastern portion of the forest will find themselves repulsed by hordes of trapped dryads and treemen, eager to feed their groves with warm bodies and blood. Secondly, concentrating the malevolent parts of the forest within a single region ensures that the rest of Athel Loren is more benign than it otherwise would be, though an outsider would never know. Finally, some of the most powerful spirits in the Wildwoods have been captured within a sword crafted from pure waystone. Known as the Spirit Sword, this is one of the most powerful weapons in the Wood Elves' arsenal. The blade's prisoners give it power, consuming the souls of any creature unfortunate enough to be nicked by the blade. While strong-willed individuals may be able to resist the effects for a while, the sword always wins in the end. Cythral appears several times throughout Wood Elven history. The first time it's mentioned by name is -625 IC, when Coeddil was banished to the Wildwoods. The Elder and his handmaidens had tried to prevent Orion's rebirth, killing every wild rider they could find while the King in the Woods was dead, and Ariel slept within the Oak of Ages. Without the Wild Riders, Orion would be reborn much weaker the following spring, if at all. While Ariel stopped Coeddil almost immediately, she could not bring herself to slay the Elder, and instead contented herself with exiling him to the Wildwoods. Coeddil was trapped there for 3,000 years, only escaping in 2518 IC, when the Dryad Drycha used the relics of several nature deities to blow a hole in the Treeman's prison large enough for him to escape. Cythral also made an appearance in the 2252nd year of the Imperial calendar, when all of Athel Loren was under assault by a huge force of beastmen. While the imprisoned forest spirits didn't work alongside the elves, they were more than happy to tear apart any gores that crossed their path. During the End Times, Cythral was among the first Wood Elven realms to fall. Sometime in 2526 IC, Drycha finally destroyed the entire waystone fence surrounding the Wildwoods. Insane forest spirits spilled forth, laying waste to the nearby halls of Cythral's elves. Lady Drea tried to hold the Dryads and Treemen with force of arms, but ultimately met her doom on the slopes of the Coeddinian Edge. The Cythrali were almost completely annihilated, and Athel Loren overrun by maddened forest spirits, but Elithanar and the warriors of Nagarath arrived to stymie their advance. The Aesir assimilated the remaining Elves of Sithral and ran a hit-and-run campaign against the Fey army, keeping them hemmed into their ancient prison. If you want to bring a Cythral army on tabletop, you have two options. The first is bringing an army that's entirely comprised of Wood Elves, with strong contingents of Eternal Guards, Wildwood Rangers, and Spellweavers. This represents the elves who guard the waystone border of the realm, always on the lookout for escapees. While technically there's nothing in the lore about the Elves of Sithral ignoring the assistance of friendly forest spirits, it's also hard to imagine them willingly marching alongside Dryads and Treemen considering their history, so avoid these choices to keep things consistent. When painting the elf army, try to use dark greens in your paint job. The Cythrali use such colors to represent the peril of their homeland, and often feature shadows in their heraldry for similar reasons. Owls and similarly stealthy animals can be found on their banners, which can look quite nice when properly painted. Alternatively, you can bring a forest spirit army to represent Cythral. This would be an army made from the Dryads and Treemen imprisoned within the Wildwoods. You don't really want to use Treekin in this army, as those are created from the spirits of dead elves, so you're kind of stuck with just two types of units. That can make the army a little dull, but it is a good excuse to bring Drycha in a loreful manner. I don't really have any recommendations for the paint job, but you can probably paint them any way you like, as these spirits would hail from any portion of Athel Loren. That would make them a very diverse army in an artistic capacity, if not from a rules perspective. That will bring us to the end of our overview of Cythral, the most dangerous part of Athel Loren, which is saying something. It's not exactly a safe place in the best of times. Still, that's a cool part of the Wood Elf lore. In most settings, elves and dryads would get along pretty well if they're part of the same faction, but in Warhammer you have to quarantine an entire portion of your forest because the tree spirits are jerks. What a lovely world, right? Anyways, this is also my first video in quite a while. Sorry about that. Don't worry, I wasn't idle for all of that time. I actually got a series of videos prepared and waiting in the wings for late August, so keep an eye on that. No spoilers yet, but I do hope you all like Lizardmen. Anyways, until next time, this has been Sigmar's Chosen, signing off for now.